Awesome. So I'm just going to give a little bit of a brief welcome and then introduce our panelists. So welcome to the ATOAC's Women's Online Roundtable. Today we will be discussing building a career focused on promoting long-term health and osteoarthritis prevention and treatment. First, I want to take the opportunity to thank these three leading women in the athletic training for taking the time to participate in this roundtable. I know many young women in the athletic training profession, including myself, admire all of you, and we look forward to hearing about your personal experience and advice. Marge Albohm is currently the Director of Clinical Research and Fellowships at Azure Americas. She was the first woman athletic trainer at Indiana University and has worked on the medical staff of various Olympic events, including serving as the Medical Director for Olympic Track and Field Trials. She has also served as the NATA President and NATA Foundation President. Dr. Tricia Hubbard-Turner is an Associate Professor in Athletic Training Program Director in the Department of Kinesiology at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte. Her research focuses on ankle instability and osteoarthritis, utilizing a multidisciplinary approach by incorporating both animal model and human subjects research designs. She has also served as an editorial board member for multiple journals and the NATA Foundation. Dr. Lindsey Lepley is an assistant professor in the School of Kinesiology at the University of Michigan. Her research focuses on neuromuscular effects of traumatic knee joint trauma, interventions to address neuromuscular dysfunction, and how to minimize the risk of post-traumatic knee osteoarthritis development. She also incorporates both animal model and human subjects research designs in her studies, and received a K Award from the National Institute of Health in 2018. She was recently voted as Vice Chair of the Athletic Trainers Osteoarthritis Consortium. Awesome. So, could you guys just tell us a little bit about yourselves and sort of the trajectories of your careers, just to start us off?
I was one of the first 5 women certified in the country. So that was way back, and really focused on understanding the female athlete and participation and making that an equal opportunity from a sports standpoint and from a medical care standpoint. So throughout my career, I was volunteering in, we didn't have state associations then, but district and service, and seeing the athletic training profession grow and have such total acceptance for women in the field, and really allowing women to have a voice in leadership. So fast forward, district director, board vice president, and then president of the NATA from 2008 to 2012. And I do think, I have to say, one of the highlights was certainly that, but also president of the NATA Research and Education Foundation, which gave me an understanding and awareness for how important research was at that time to our profession, to establish athletic trainers as scientists. And that's why I'm so proud of what you've done and everybody in the consortium, because you're doing it, and you're doing it so well. So congratulations to all of you. I joined Azure Americas about 11 years ago. They knew, global company, they knew nothing about athletic trainers. They didn't even know who an athletic trainer was, but immediately respected my clinical knowledge, my relationship with physicians, and I've been with Azure 11 years now.
Awesome.
Hi, I've been at UNC Charlotte now for 15 years. So this was my first kind of real job. I started as an undergraduate in athletic training, and early on I started doing some research, and I really loved it. I love working clinically, and I love working with people in terms of, working in the training room. But really quickly, I very much started to gravitate towards research and education. And so then that kind of pushed me to go get my master's and then my PhD. And I've always been really driven by kind of trying to figure out, how do we make people or help people not only get back to activity and play, but really more importantly, if I'm working with an 18-year-old, what can I do to make sure when they're 30, 40, 50, 60 years old, they could hopefully be active, healthy participants in whatever types of stuff they like to do. And so that's really been what's kind of driven my research. Now I'm at that point in my career where, I'm kind of in mid-career level. So I'm an associate professor, working towards moving towards full, and really trying to figure out how to kind of continue balancing, and if there is really a true balance. Doing the research that I love and I'm excited about, but then also I'm the director of our now Master's of Science and Athletic Training program. So we've just transitioned from the bachelor's degree, and so kind of working in this kind of new challenge where kind of used to running the bachelor's degree program and now the master's degree program, as I kind of hopefully continue to move forward and progress in my career.
I'll round out this part of the discussion. So I sort of fell into this profession and fell into this sort of specific sort of line. In terms of research, it wasn't something that was ever really on my radar. I actually started doing it because it was a requirement of the master's program at the University of Virginia. And so, and it kind of lit a different fire in me, and I got sort of caught by it. And what's continued to sort of inspire me and, gets me excited to come to work every day is my favorite part of working clinically was rehabilitation. So it's been fun to redirect rehabilitation or make new recommendations based on the work that we're seeing in the lab. So it's all sort of focused around interest I had as a clinician, and now bridging interest that I have as a researcher, and making sort of that interconnection. So it was a requirement that I fell into, that I ended up loving, and find enjoyment out of pursuing every day.
Awesome. Well, thank you. So our first question, we actually had a few people email and provide some really awesome questions that they want answered. The first one is, what barriers have you had to overcome early in your career, either in securing any clinical positions, tenure positions, and research funding?
I think for me, I think the biggest...
Sorry.
No, go Marge.
No, go ahead. Yeah, please.
I think for me, the biggest barrier I've had to really just figure out is time management. And just really trying to figure out how to make sure I can do all the things that may be on my plate at any one time, especially early on in my career when, I started working, where I wasn't necessarily ready for some of the other things that come with an academic job in terms of service and department things that I needed to do, as well as running a program and then also teaching, to have that time for research, to have the time to find the grants and to get the stuff published and get the stuff out there. So I think early on, it was really about just trying to figure out how to manage my time.
Yeah, and I think early in my career, when, as I said, there were so few women, trying to figure out how to navigate things, right? And I think that's what we all still face today. In my job today, it's how do you navigate what's going on? How do you, like you said, balance? How do you keep from saying yes too often and get unbalanced? And but really understanding the system or environment that you're in, and learning internally and sometimes externally how to navigate those really key junctures and important things that you need to know how to be successful.
For me, it's been learning to embrace failure. We bumble along a lot in the lab until we get things right. And we have found that we learn much more from the mistakes that we make than from getting it right the first time, and sort of accepting, that grants are a hard game, and, manuscript publication's hard too. But if you're listening to the feedback that you're getting, generally that helps sort of refine and improve your work. So I think it's sort of accepting and embracing failure and using it as sort of a learning experience to push us forward and in a better, sort of more refined direction.
Absolutely. Marge, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how you got involved in working the Olympic events, and how that sort of your trajectory of your career worked towards that, working clinically with those athletes.
Right, thanks. And so I was in Indianapolis at the time and spent most of my career there. And Indianapolis was really becoming the what they named the amateur sports capital of the world, and brought all these events into the city, Olympic trials in multiple sports, Pan Am games, etc. When I left Indiana University, I joined my orthopedic surgeon, Merrill Ritter, in his private practice. And he said that at that time, Marge, don't stay at the university. Let's start sports medicine clinics. And that was in the 80s. You know, I'm like, okay, what are sports medicine clinics? And he said, we'll figure it out. And that probably, I know, the biggest influence on my life and my career was the opportunities that my mentors gave to me. So when events came to Indianapolis, and Dr. Ritter was a big presence in Indianapolis, he said, let's give back to this city. We're service-oriented people, and that's who we are as athletic trainers, right? And he said, let's volunteer, let's set up the medical coverage, let's do this for every event that came into the city. So I was really honored that I had those opportunities. We're all about service as athletic trainers, so it was a passion for me. And every time I would say, oh my gosh, can we really do this? You know, like, oh my gosh, how do we do it? And he would say, never be afraid, never be intimidated by it. It's just added responsibility, and anybody can take on more responsibility. So really gave me life lessons to accept challenges, even when I might not know exactly how to address them and feel I'm very, very uncomfortable doing it. Just do it, and you learn and grow. So that was my experience with all those events.
Awesome. Both Tricia and Lindsey, how did you get involved in some of the animal model research? Because I have a feeling that both of you guys started more on the human research side, just as how athletic training research sort of transpires. So how did you guys get involved in incorporating that into your research repertoire?
Well, for me, it was, you know, yeah, if you probably would have asked me when I was a graduate student if I'd be doing animal research, I would have laughed. But very shortly upon my time of arriving at UNC Charlotte, we had a few faculty members that do animal research. And honestly, it was a lunchtime conversation. You know, it was like, here's the issues or here's the things that I really would like to do, you know, in terms of really looking more at this long-term kind of effect and looking at what happens or what changes. So we know people sprain their ankles. You know, we know they don't get better, but really how do we quantify that or show that more in terms of a bigger picture, especially in terms of relation to osteoarthritis development and physical activity. And so it was one of those things where over lunch, one of the faculty members that I work with was like, well, what if you sprained a mouse's ankle? You know, do mice develop ankle osteoarthritis? And because we have an activity model that we do, and you know, we regularly do this research where we keep mice alive across their entire lifespan, and we can measure physical activity, and we can do different things with wheel running. And so it just kind of started from that in terms of having things that I wanted to do, but maybe didn't necessarily know the best way to do it. And so that kind of opened the door for this kind of the fun stuff that we're doing in terms of long-term osteoarthritis and physical activity research.
Awesome.
For me, it was like focusing on the question. So I was finishing up my doctoral work at the University of Michigan under Ryan Palmieri Smith, and we had some observations that like we just simply couldn't explain at the time. And in particular, we found that, you know, certain types of exercise or the mode of muscle contraction appeared to be beneficial to patients after ACL reconstruction. And so I sort of focused on the fact that I didn't know enough about that. And I went to sort of train with the people that I thought knew much more. So I sought sort of Tim Butterfield's lab because I knew he, you know, had animal models and that he was an expert in eccentric exercise. And so by sort of following the question and trying to dig through the data, it broadened sort of our research line to include animal models to make some of those types of observations. And we continue to sort of maintain both lines of the house.
Great. Okay, so our next question was about mentors. So who has been your most influential mentors throughout your career?
And so I mentioned, of course, my team physician. You know, as athletic trainers, we've learned to work together in the athletic training room and on the sidelines and really have an understanding with our physicians, right, about who we are and about how to work together. And he became my number one mentor. But I have to say that throughout my career, I've had many, many mentors in athletic training. Many have been men because there just weren't that many women when I started. And I've had the privilege of mentoring other people, also athletic training students and other. And then in my career, it wasn't as formalized as it is now. And I think that it is great that it's talked about, that it's focused, that we encourage students, young professionals, mid-career professionals, any of us, to establish mentors and have calls and guidance and agendas with them. And I do that with several graduate students and colleagues that I work with. So very, very important and just really critical to build that network of mentors throughout your career.
Great. For me, early on, it was probably Dr. Tom Kaminsky. I worked with him both in my undergraduate and my master's work. He's really the reason why I got into research. So it was kind of one of those things in class with him as an undergraduate, and I had some questions, and he was like, well, why don't you come down to the lab and check it out? And so his mentorship early, but even throughout my entire career, you know, I consider him a really good friend and someone that I can come and talk to about lots of things. And then that continued with Dr. J. Hurdle, working with him and getting to work with both now still through this day. But also even my husband's a researcher and a faculty member. So I go to him with a lot of stuff too. And so it's nice to have that at home, even to have somebody else to kind of come to and talk to and kind of say, hey, I got these reviews on this manuscript, or this is what I'm thinking about with this grant. And so it's nice to have someone at home even to be able to kind of bump some ideas off of and talk to some stuff about.
For me, it's been a blend of my PhD and my postdoc mentor. So Ryan, I was fortunate to train under a female. She sort of set the bar for me and like role modeled what I wanted to become. And then working under Tim Butterfield, he gave me the confidence to like learn how to fabricate things. And if something wasn't built, that's okay. You can build it yourself. So it gave me sort of a new confidence and a different lens to look through. What's nice about both Tim and Ryan is they like have continued to make me a priority, right? Like if I have an issue, they're very, you know, easy to get a hold of, and, you know, have continued to mentor, you know, far beyond sort of the formulatic portion of like the PhD or the postdoc. So I've been really fortunate in that regard.
Great. So along the lines of mentorship, this may have different answers, but I think it has some overlap, which is what recommendations do you have for both finding and being a mentor?
I think reach out to people, you know, networking, and then observing different leaders or different people in your specialty area that you want to learn from. And then, as I said today, you know, just ask directly. I'm always honored when people come to me and say, would you be my mentor? Can we have that relationship? So I think it's really important to just ask that question. And I think people are doing that.
I agree. Well, and the NATA has a great mentorship program too. So that's something that, you know, someone can seek out. So if they aren't sure, they don't know maybe where to find a mentor, that may be a good stepping, you know, stone in terms of places to start to look. And then also too, if someone's interested in becoming a mentor too, I know they're always seeking mentors. And so those are great opportunities for both the mentee as well as someone who wants to become a mentor.
My advice for folks is always, we sort of treat it like an academic marriage. Like this is sort of a tight relationship that we're going to have at least for 4 years and, you know, hopefully for longer. So do your homework and talk to people that are working or have worked with that person before to get the real scoop of like what it's like sort of day to day, elbow to elbow with that person. Maybe as a baseline, you know, find the papers and things that you're interested in and see whose labs those are coming out of, you know, and reach out and touch base. We get a lot of emails, you know, with prospective students, and we weed through those, you know, every year to see like, you know, who would be a good fit. So talking to other people, talking to the PI, and just kind of getting familiar with the literature and where your interests are.
Awesome. So what efforts have you made throughout your careers to promote inclusive environments, whether that be in your athletic training rooms, your research laboratories, or even your classrooms?
So I think from my standpoint, not being in an academic setting, whenever there were committee openings or spots in the NATA for volunteers, I would always look to make sure that women were included and given leadership roles. And also now and in recent years, that includes not just women, but men and minorities and everyone who really needs a voice and needs representation in leadership. And so I was very conscious of that in my leadership roles.
I think in our research lab, we try to be very purposeful with recruiting. So everyone in our research lab teaches undergraduate courses, which is great because I think that gives us the ability, because obviously you can go into a classroom and say, hey, we do this stuff in the lab. We're looking for students who want to come in or want to get some experience, whether it's formal, or just more informal. But I think when we have those students, again, whether they're females or minorities, whomever they may be, that are really good students, but maybe they're not volunteering, or maybe they're, not kind of coming out, as at least approaching them and kind of saying, hey, you're doing great stuff. You're doing a great job in this classroom. We think you have really great potential. What would you think about coming down to a lab meeting, coming to a journal club, coming downstairs and kind of seeing what we have going on. So trying to be very purposeful about, making sure we get lots of different types of students involved. And then from there, kind of see where it goes. Once we at least kind of initially get them kind of interested, because sometimes I think a lot of times they may not think it doesn't apply to them, or that they can't do it, or they wouldn't be good enough, or that opportunity wouldn't be something that would be, that would normally be something that they would want to do. And so sometimes it's just about that very purposeful, I think, kind of reaching out and kind of helping them see that they are doing good stuff, and that we think that they could potentially play a great role in our lab.
We've been fortunate to, be a part of like a lot of undergraduate seminars where we'll pick up students, whether they be from rec sports or from other disciplines. So we sort of cast a wide net, knowing that everybody can bring something unique to the lab. In the last year, we had psychology majors, molecular cellular biology majors, like everybody across the field that were sort of head down working in the lab with us, and everybody brought something different and new, which is sort of awesome. The other thing that we've done is sort of formally engaged in programs that purposefully support students maybe that are first generation students, with summer internships or programs like that, which have been really mutually beneficial for the lab. And then I myself sort of engage as junior faculty when there's sort of women seminars on campus, to get better connected to senior faculty that are in similar positions and sort of navigated this route before, which has also led to the involvement of inclusiveness in the lab.
This is the classic like work-life balance question that I think everyone that emailed me had some form of this type of question. So how do you balance the combination of your career, instructing your students, being a mentor to your grad students, and of course your family and your personal lives? How have you sort of worked through some of those challenges? I know, Tricia, earlier you had said that work-life balance, you had kind of mentioned about it, but what have you guys experienced?
So I always start this by saying, don't do what I've done. Do not lead an unbalanced life, because I think that's my era of athletic trainer that did that. And you all are of a different era, and really recognizing how work-life balance is so important and prevents burnout, but just for your own health and your family's health and your own psychological health. I say set boundaries. You can't do everything. I think our first instinct, the personalities that we are, is to say, yes, I'll do that. Great, I'll do it. Who raises their hand first? We all do, right? Well, don't do that as much. Really set boundaries and balance, and see what's really important for your career goals and your family's growth goals. And then be very, very selective, because you're pulled 1,000 different ways in all the positions that you have in with family. And just have to be good to yourself, and it's okay. It's okay to say no, and don't feel guilty about it. I just said no last week, and the person came back and said, won't you please do this? I'm like, okay, yes. So don't do that. Say no, and don't be guilty about it.
No, that's true. Because there really is no true thing as balance. Because again, there only is a certain amount of time in the day. and you get pulled in a lot of directions. And so I think you're right, saying no for sure, and figuring out how to protect your time is very important. But then also prioritizing and kind of trying to figure out, all right, so what things do I need to do, and how do I make sure? Because I know my biggest problem that I have sometimes is, I have to physically go and teach. I have to physically do the different things that I have to do for like running of the program. And so a lot of times research very quickly gets put to the back burner. Because again, I have to go do these things. That student shows up in my office, and it's physically, I have to take care of whatever that student's issues are. And so a lot of times it's easy for that. So I really have to kind of find those chunks of times where I say, on Tuesday from 9 to noon, I'm doing research. I'm shutting my office door. I'm not going to book any other meetings with students or anything, deal with that kind of stuff, to really kind of protect that time. To really say, I'm working on this specific task, or whatever it is that I want to do related to research, and, just kind of give yourself forgiveness too. Because again, you can't do everything, and it's hard to really manage, all the different things that you have to do sometimes to be successful. And so sometimes I think forgiving yourself and understanding it's okay if something doesn't get done, and trying to figure out other ways to do things. Sometimes that's important.
So my first tenure track position was at the University of Connecticut, and I had some colleagues there that were very early risers, and I sort of jumped on that train. So I've restructured my day where if there's like something pertinent that needs to get done, I'm a 4:30 wake up and get it done before I hit the office. And what I found that does is it sort of alleviates me of the stress of like, I really need to make, some movement on this publication or grant application for the day. And by the time I hit the office, my focus is sort of redirected to, helping people with their tasks or taking on teaching. And then, at night, once we put our kid to bed, I really don't work, most weeknights. I try to turn it off. And I've actually found by turning things off that I'm more excited and more energized by the time I get back into it the following day. So I've restructured my work day. I found it works for me. I've been given the advice that there's a lot of parts about your day that you can do at like 75%. And there's like few things that you truly need to do at like 100%. And so I try to gauge those requests sometimes, and figure out like, is this 100% or not? And then, accept non-perfection for some of the activities that I do. And I've also been given the advice that saying no to something means saying yes to something else. So, or saying, let me think about it before, immediately feeling like you have to give an answer on the spot can maybe let you weigh that particular task and whether or not, it's good for you or not.
Absolutely. One of the things that I think comes up a lot that I personally have had questions about, and I know that a few of the people had emailed me about, is about experiences with like maternity leave. And so I know it's going to vary a lot from, even state to state and just job to job. But I think one of the questions was, what were the expectations of your position if you did take maternity leave, and what were what were your experiences through that as well?
Well, for me, when I took maternity leave, we get a full semester away from the institution, and there's no formal. So like the program director position was given to somebody else. We have the choice too, whether or not you want to, you can use that time and take it off in terms of take that time off from the tenure clock. I chose to not do that. So I stayed on my normal tenure clock because I was an assistant at the time. And so I really chose to use that semester as time to be at home and be a mom. And, of course, some things got done. You can't fully turn off the research desire and need. So when napping occurs, then, kind of open some stuff up or work on some stuff. So I kind of use it as a good semester since I didn't have any formal expectations. It was actually really nice because I got to kind of pick and choose some stuff that I wanted to work on for the things that I was excited about. But then also just be at home and be a mom.
we're preparing to like take our second maternity leave at any moment now. So I can tell you my experience with the first one is I sort of reframed it that work is paying me not to work right now. And so, you know, I'm going to enjoy the time away. So certainly for the first couple of weeks when we were like really figuring it out, like we were pretty much at like, if you need us at critical mass, you know, for our graduate students, like, please let us know. But otherwise, you know, we pretty much turned everything down. I don't know what it will be the second time around, but I've tried to reframe it that work is like, you know, paying you to leave. So, you know, take the time, you don't get it back. You know, maintain the things that, you know, need to be maintained, but enjoy the experience as well.
Did you guys feel like you had pretty supportive, like, staff and departments, like around you guys when you were going through that process?
Yeah, I definitely did. I definitely felt like there was no pressure or anything, or I think if there was any pressure, it was probably more internal than for sure, not external.
I would agree.
Awesome. So when we're talking about this work-life balance, it also, you guys have very strong records of the service that you guys have put into a lot of different organizations. And I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about what your service you've participated in, and also, what service that you participated in and how you went about picking which service opportunities were sort of important to you and that you wanted to be involved in.
So I think early on, I really observed other leaders and who I admired, and really wanted to saw their example, and wanted to follow those same leadership kind of tracks, giving back to the profession. I think, as I said earlier, I was given a lot of opportunity by a lot of different people. The interest in the Research and Education Foundation in its early days was so strong for me, because when I joined my physician in his private practice, he asked me to head up his research foundation. And as a total joint surgeon, he researched every single implant that he put in, every revision that he did. He saved that implant and studied over time which implants were failing, which were working, etc. Every single patient was a research subject in his practice, tracking outcomes long before outcomes were, you know, even talked about. So that interest, that really interested me in working with the foundation. And it was so young then. We really, even our own members, had no idea why the NATA needed a research foundation, because we were athletic trainers, not researchers, right? And so adding to the growth and the greater understanding and the development of that foundation in its early years was one of the most rewarding things I've ever done. And again, that started with my relationship running Dr. Ritter's Research Foundation. And I do have to say that the last issue of the NATA News, the research issue, I could not be prouder of everyone who contributed. The research culture that we have now in our profession is amazing. And what you people are doing, and people on this webinar, you just keep doing it, because you are outstanding and building such a name for who athletic trainers are in the scientific community. And that establishes us as scientists and strong clinicians. So long answer to a short question, sorry.
No, that's great.
For me, I've chosen to always, again, I think one of the things I struggle with in my job is you know, feeling that I don't have that time to do the research, or at least the time that I want to put into the research. So I've enjoyed doing service with the NATA Research and Education Foundation, you know, serving on the grants and awards committee, also reviewing abstracts for the annual meeting. I'm now serving on the Fellows Committee, because the nice thing about all those committees is, one, I get to give back, but then also, two, it keeps me always, again, it keeps me within the loop of just all the different research that's, going on in and around the profession, and, and reviewing grants or reviewing abstracts, or even when serving on different editorial boards and reviewing manuscripts. It's one of those things that it's time that I have to put very specifically to and towards research. So it helps me do a better job, I think, scheduling and making sure research continues to always be a priority.
I think as an assistant professor, you have to make really important sort of estimations about time investment, because you're stretched pretty thin, and you're judged pretty harshly at this stage of your career. So I've tried to find, similar to what Tricia just said, like resources that are mutually beneficial, where there's some benefit to me joining it. If I review more grants, I'll probably get better at writing my own grants, right? If I'm involved in more committees that promote awareness in our profession, that's good for the next generation. And maybe that will also help me identify up and coming students that would be good fits for the lab, right? So I try to find opportunities that will help sort of push the lab forward, but also push the profession forward at the same time. So sort of mutually beneficial endeavors. So it's worth the time investment when, your time is so precious.
Awesome. Our last question is just, what advice would you offer to young female clinicians and scientists in athletic training?
Well, I think there's so many opportunities to network now, and there's so many outstanding role models and mentors out there. So start networking, and I know you all do. Seth Godin, who's one of my most favorite modern day philosophers, says, create a tribe, people who think like you, who will support you, who will encourage you, and will also give you opportunity. And have that group of people, 4 or 5 maybe, who you can go to and really talk to about what your career goals are and what you want to accomplish in your professional life. But the networking is the most important, and I think it's fabulous, the opportunities that you have to do that now.
I agree with that, and I would also say, don't be afraid to be open. So if you have a research line, or if you have an area that you've been doing stuff in, or that you're trying to follow, but also don't be afraid to be open to either different pathways to take that research, whether, again, it'd be like human research versus animal research, or even different folks to work with, even like data science, or different types of opportunities and different ways to take that research, whether it is to ultimately help you get some funding, and looking at different collaborators or folks to work or interact with, multidisciplinary approaches at looking at and answering questions. I think those are all great ways to really help a research line evolve and develop, and hopefully then end in, some significant funding and different types of opportunities for that person.
I think I would echo forming a supportive team, a group of people that you can just vent to, that, aren't going to go away and offer solid advice. I also think, like, failure is very painful, and we've certainly experienced a lot of it, but being okay with it, and having some resilience and learning from your mistakes, and knowing that, like, most people don't get it right the first time around, and that's perfectly fine. But being, sticking with things, I think that's been sort of one of the more important lessons that we've learned.
Great. Well, I just wanted to thank you all again for doing this webinar. That was all the questions that were asked so far. So I really appreciate it. And I also, let me just bring it up really quickly. If I can.
I just want to add something to what Tricia said earlier, if I could, about the importance of wanting to recognize the injury early, the importance of that early injury, because your goal is to keep that person mobile and active and achieving their full quality of life, their entire lifespan, right? So you as researchers in osteoarthritis are setting such great standards for looking at that early injury, what interventions work, because as Tricia said, an 18-year-old doesn't know or care at that point, right? What they're going to feel like when they're 50. But it is so critical what we know now and what research has shown about that early injury, right? And how it leads to osteoarthritis. And the work that you're doing, and if we can communicate that to practicing athletic trainers, just the impact of managing that initial injury, that cartilage injury, that articular cartilage injury, aggressively and properly when it happens, and the difference that means to that person's entire life. And that's a strong message that your research is showing.
Awesome. Well, thank you. That's I think a really great point to end on for sure. I keep messing this up. Sorry, I'm trying to bring up a slide really quickly. Are you guys able to see that slide? No?
Nope.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll just plug it. So, just wanted to recommend following the ATOAC on Twitter and on Facebook for future roundtables. I also wanted to talk about 2 different career building resources for some of the young professionals that are on the call right now, which is that there's the discussion group for osteoarthritis prevention related to sport, exercise, and physical activity at the ORSI 2020 World Congress, and they're working to build some more career building activities. And also the Young Investigators Initiative for Grant Mentoring and Career Development from the U.S. Bone and Joint Initiative and the Bone and Joint Canada. Applications for this process are due in January, but I've personally heard it from multiple people that it's a really fantastic opportunity. So just wanted to provide those career services for some of our attendees as well. So thank you guys again so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for setting it up. Thank you. Thank you.